My name is Avery Cole. I'm 30 years old, and 3 weeks ago my parents stole my car and gave it to my sister like it was a spare hoodie I'd left on their couch. They didn't call. They didn't ask. They used the hidden key from my apartment, handed her the keys, then told the family I'd agreed. I only found out when I walked out of work and saw an empty parking spot where my Camry should have been. That was the moment their favorite word, family, started to sound like a threat. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you. Stories like this don't happen in the dark, they happen at the dinner table, in group texts, in the quiet moments you're expected to swallow. If any of that feels familiar, stay with me. I grew up in a house where love sounded like instructions, and fairness was something whispered about in other people's families. From the outside, the Coles looked normal. Two parents who hosted backyard barbecues, a manicured lawn, a front porch with rocking chairs that creaked when the wind hit just right. But on the inside, everything tilted quietly toward one person, my sister Sienna. People used to say she had a tender heart, the kind that bruises if you breathe too hard near it. Dad told relatives she felt things were 10 times stronger than the average kid. Mom said she was born fragile, like some kind of emotional glass sculpture. And I, Avery, the older daughter, was the solid one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need anything. I didn't know it back then, but that label would shape almost every corner of my life. One of my earliest memories is of dinner on a rainy Thursday night. I was 6, Sienna 3. I remember the clatter of forks, the yellow glow of the overhead light, the smell of my mom's overcooked pot roast. Mom was leaning over Sienna's plate, cutting her meat into tiny pieces, fussing over her like she was feeding a baby bird. I remember reaching for the basket of rolls, stomach growling, and Mom slapped my hand, not hard, but sharp. "Let your sister pick first," she said. "She barely eats. You always have plenty." I pulled my hand back, cheeks flushing, the warmth fading from my appetite. It was the first time I noticed how invisible I could be while sitting right at the table. Later, when I was 10, I won a science fair at school. I'd spent weeks building a solar oven from cardboard and foil, proud of how it actually melted a piece of chocolate during judging. Mom and Dad came to the event, but the moment we walked into the gym, Sienna burst into tears because her glitter hair clip had fallen off in the car. Dad scooped her up. Mom knelt beside her, soothing. By the time they calmed her down, the awards portion was over. They missed my name being called. "Sweetheart, we're so proud," Mom said afterwards, ruffling my hair with a distracted smile. "But you know your sister gets overwhelmed." I nodded. I swallowed it. But it was deeper than I realized. There were hundreds of moments like that, tiny scenes that stitched themselves into a pattern. At 14, I got my first job cleaning tables at a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and frying oil. I saved for months to buy a used laptop, the fan loud enough to drown out my thoughts. The next day, I walked into Sienna's room and found a brand new MacBook on her bed, still wrapped in plastic. Mom's voice floated from the hallway. "She needs it for her art program. Don't make things difficult." I didn't argue. But a part of me wilted, quietly and permanently. And then came the iPad incident, the one that still makes my stomach clench when I think about it. I was 16. It was hot out, the kind of suffocating summer heat that turns every room into a sauna. I was doing algebra on my bed when Sienna stormed in, waving her iPad like a weapon. "You went through my messages," she screamed. "What? No, I didn't even..." She dropped the iPad. Right there. Deliberately. It hit the hardwood floor with a sickening crack. By the time my parents rushed in, she was crying, pointing at me, saying I'd ripped it out of her hands. I remember standing there, stunned, the truth forming a tight knot in my throat. Mom looked between us and made a decision I still feel the sting of. "Avery," she said quietly, "just say you did it. Your sister can't handle the stress." "I didn't," I whispered. Dad sighed. "Sometimes it doesn't matter what happened. It matters what keeps the peace." I didn't know it then, but that moment would come back to haunt me in ways none of us expected. I paid for half the replacement by picking up extra shifts after school. I told myself I was being mature, responsible, strong. But really I was being trained, Years later, I would see it clearly. Every apology they demanded, every sacrifice they praised, every time they said, "Be the bigger person," it was a slow erosion of my right to be treated fairly. Back then, all I knew was that my voice didn't matter, not compared to hers. And I thought that was normal, until the day it wasn't. By the time I was 19, the favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. It was the architecture of our family. Every routine, every decision, every crisis bent around Sienna like she was the sun, and we were all orbiting to keep her warm. I used to think that's just how families worked. But some memories don't fade. They stay sharp like warning signs you didn't know how to read at the time. It was the winter I came home from college with a chest infection that made every breath feel like breathing through wet cotton. I remember lying on the couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like old detergent, watching dust shift through the gray afternoon light. My appointment with the doctor was at 3. Dad promised he'd drive me. At 2:30, Mom rushed down the stairs, coat in hand. "Sienna, grab your bag, we're running late." I pushed myself upright, head spinning. "My appointment?" "Oh, honey," Mom said, barely slowing. "We had to cancel. Sienna's dance competition got moved up. This one is important. She could qualify for state." I remember how Dad wouldn't look me in the eye as they hurried Sienna out the door, curls sprayed into place, cheeks pink with excitement. "We'll reschedule," he said. "You'll bounce back. You always do. Bounce back." Like I was some kind of rubber ball they could drop and know it wouldn't break. They left me with a glass of lukewarm orange juice and a half-empty bottle of cherry cough syrup. I watched the door close behind them, the house falling into a silence that felt suffocating. I didn't know it then, but that moment would repeat itself for years, me sick, tired, hurting, alone. And then choosing Sienna's next moment over my current reality. College wasn't much different. I worked 2 campus jobs, library assistant and late-night cafe shifts that left my clothes smelling like burnt espresso. I saved every dollar, a slow crawl toward independence. One semester, my savings account dropped by nearly $1,000 overnight. When I called Dad, panicked, he said almost casually, "We needed it for Sienna's car. Emergency. We'll put it back." They never did. Years later, I'd find out from Aunt Carla, while she flipped burgers in her backyard, smoke curling up into the summer air, that the emergency was Sienna driving her second car into a concrete divider at 2 in the morning. It wasn't the first time she'd pushed the world to catch her, and it wouldn't be the last. "She's lucky they had that money," Aunt Carla said, handing me a bun. Insurance wouldn't cover much with her record. I stood there holding a paper plate, watching Sienna laugh across the yard with her friends, their manicured nails wrapped around red plastic cups. My parents hovered nearby, making sure no one scuffed her new sedan. No one noticed the way my stomach dropped. A week later, back in my childhood bedroom, staring at the plastic stars on the ceiling, something settled in me. Not anger, not even sadness, just a quiet, growing truth. If I didn't create my own life, I would never have one. So I moved to Denver. I found a job coding from a small desk in a glass building that hummed with fluorescent lights and the low buzz of burnt Keurig coffee. My apartment was tiny, but the view of the city at night made it feel like possibility instead of limits. For the first time, no one touched my things. No one asked for my money. No one told me to wait to sacrifice to be the bigger person. I learned what silence felt like when it wasn't filled with expectation. And for 6 years, I built myself from scratch. I budgeted every paycheck. I repaired my own microwave when it died. I learned how to cook meals that didn't come from a frozen aisle. And when I finally bought my silver 2023 Camry, brand new, paid with my own hands, it felt like putting a flag in the ground. Mine. I didn't know the universe had a twisted sense of humor. I didn't know that the people who once told me I was strong enough to handle anything were about to test that claim in the cruelest way. Because everything I had built, my independence, my boundaries, my peace, was about to be challenged by the same people who taught me to swallow hurt for the sake of family. And the day my car vanished from that parking garage was the day the past came crashing back, demanding to be confronted. The night my car disappeared, something old and familiar woke up in me: panic, dressed as responsibility, fear wrapped in the belief that if something went wrong, it must somehow be my fault. That feeling had kept me quiet my whole life. But this time, it didn't silence me. It sharpened me. The parking garage felt colder than usual. Every sound echoed too loudly: the hum of the lights, the distant slam of a door on another level, the click of my own heels that suddenly sounded unsteady. I kept replaying my parents' voices in my head. Relax. Don't be dramatic. You'll be fine. Your sister needs it more. The words clung to me like humidity. After filing the police report with Officer Ruiz, I went home in a rideshare, staring at my trembling reflection in the window the whole drive. Denver blurred past neon signs, flickering headlights streaking across wet pavement, the city breathing around me while my chest felt too tight to expand. In my apartment, the silence had weight. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, but the comfort I usually felt there had evaporated. I walked in circles around my living room, replaying every decision I'd made that day, trying to find the moment I'd lost control of my own life. I didn't sleep. My phone lit up with call after call from Mom and Dad, then from relatives whose names I hadn't seen in months. I didn't answer any of them. The next morning at work, I sat in front of my monitor, blue light reflecting off my tired eyes. Code blurred. Nothing made sense. Around 10, Jordan appeared at my desk with a paper cup of coffee. "You look like hell," he said gently. "I feel worse," I replied. He pulled up a chair. "You want to tell me what happened in the garage last night, or do I just assume the worst?" I hesitated, but something in his expression made me trust him more than I expected. So I told him. Everything. His eyebrows climbed higher with each sentence. "Your parents took your car," he repeated. "Like, actually took it?" "Yeah. And gave it to your sister because she had an interview, yep." He blinked a few times. "Avery, that's insane." Hearing it said out loud in that blunt tone made something in me loosen. I wasn't crazy, not this time. Jordan leaned back. "Look, I'm helping security update their system this week, right? If you want, I can pull the camera footage, in case it helps with the report." My chest tightened again. "Could you?" "Sure," he said. "Give me an hour." That hour crawled. My hands shook on the keyboard. Every time someone walked by my desk, I flinched. I kept imagining Sienna laughing, tossing my keys in the air like a joke. I kept imagining my parents telling the family I was overreacting, ungrateful, dramatic. When Jordan returned, his expression told me everything before he even opened his mouth. "I've got the footage," he said quietly. "And you should sit down." He spun the monitor toward me. I leaned in. The camera angle showed level 3 early morning bright overhead lights, the timestamp blinking in the corner. Two figures appeared: a man in a gray hoodie with a familiar slope to his shoulders, and a younger woman in leggings and a messy bun. My breath stilled. The man used a key, not a lockpick, not a Slim Jim, to unlock my Camry. The woman tossed a bag in the back seat. The man got into the passenger seat. The woman drove. "Can you zoom in?" I asked, even though I already knew. Jordan clicked. The image sharpened. There was no mistaking it. It was my father, in the passenger seat. It was Sienna behind the wheel. My hand covered my mouth without me realizing. Jordan's voice softened. "Do you want me to send this to the officer? The old Avery. The obedient one. The forgiver." The fixer rose for a second offering. Reasons, excuses, justifications. They didn't mean harm. They were helping Sienna. They thought I'd understand. Family, family, family. But another part of me, a part I barely recognized, cut through the noise. "Yes," I said. "Send it." He sent the file to Officer Ruiz and emailed me a copy. My phone buzzed seconds later, Mom's name flashing in bold. I turned it face down. At lunch, I sat in the cafeteria pushing salad leaves around with my fork. My phone buzzed again. Aunt Carla. Then Uncle Dave. Then my cousin Rachel. I finally picked up one call, just one. "Avery, what are you doing?" Aunt Carla's voice snapped through the phone. "Your mom is hysterical. Your sister's terrified." I clenched my jaw. "They took my car. For her interview," she said, like that made sense. "Don't ruin the family over this. I didn't give permission. Your mom said you did." The words hit me like a slap. "She lied," I said quietly. There was a full second of silence on the other end. Then her tone twisted cold. "Well, even if she did, you don't take your own sister to court. What kind of person does that?" For the rest of the day, I let every call go to voicemail. That night, Ruiz showed up at my apartment building lobby. Her presence filled the space with a steadiness I desperately needed. "We've issued a bolo on the vehicle," she told me. "The footage helped." "Thank you." I nodded. "Do you think she'll bring it back?" Ruiz's expression remained neutral. People who take things without permission don't usually return them out of conscience, but they do get caught. I swallowed my throat tight. My parents told the rest of the family I said she could borrow it. Ruiz's eyes softened. Not pity, but understanding. Truth gets slippery in families. Law doesn't. Her words hit the exact place in me that had been aching for years. 3 days later, my phone buzzed on my desk. I saw Ruiz's name and my stomach dropped. "We located your vehicle," she said. "Your sister was pulled over for speeding near Aurora. The car is impounded." For a moment, everything inside me went quiet like a still lake before a storm. "Is she okay?" I asked automatically. "She's fine," Ruiz said. "But she'll be held for questioning." I thanked her, hung up, and sat staring at my monitor until the screen blurred. Relief tangled with anger, guilt, and something colder, something I couldn't yet name. The consequences that had been dodged for a lifetime were finally landing. And they were landing hard. The escalation had begun. The impound lot sat behind a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire lit by harsh floodlights that made everything look colder than it already was. When I pulled into the cracked parking lot in a rental car, my breath fogged the windshield. The air tasted metallic like winter and exhaust fumes. I wasn't sure what I expected to feel, anger, vindication, panic, but what settled in my chest instead was a strange mix of dread and clarity. The clerk barely looked at me when I handed over the paperwork. "Camry Silver Slot 34, he said, stamping the form with a bored thud. "The gate's open. Don't touch other vehicles." My boots crunched as I walked between rows of cars that looked abandoned and violated in equal measure. Some had broken windows. Some were covered in dust. Some still had stuffed animals in the back seat like their owners had left in a hurry. Then I saw mine. At first, relief surged through me. There, it was familiar and beautifully intact. But when I opened the door, the relief evaporated. The inside looked like someone had lived a full, chaotic life in it for weeks instead of hours. Fast food wrappers littered the floor. French fries were mashed into the carpet. An energy drink had spilled and dried sticky across the console. My emergency blanket was balled up and shoved under the back seat like trash. The glove compartment hung partially open, receipts spilling out like some wounded animal had clawed at it. But it wasn't the mess that gutted me. It was the small orange bottle in the cup holder. Anti-anxiety meds. Sienna's name on the label. My throat tightened. I picked it up with 2 fingers as if holding it wrong would break something. "She dropped that," a voice asked behind me. I turned. Officer Ruiz stood a few feet away, hands in the pockets of her jacket, breath ghosting in the cold air. "She must have," I said. Ruiz stepped closer, peering into the destroyed interior. 8 hours, she murmured. "That's all she had." 8 hours, I echoed, my voice barely steady, and this is what she did. Ruiz didn't sugarcoat anything. She wasn't the type. "People treat what they don't earn differently," she said. "Doesn't make them bad, but it does make them dangerous with other people's property." Her words struck something deep, something that wasn't about the car at all. Something about years of invisible sacrifices I'd been trained to call love. I signed the release forms, thanked her, and drove home in silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that the muscles in my forearms ached. Every smell cleaner, old fries, vanilla air freshener mixed into a cocktail of emotions I couldn't name. That night, I didn't answer the door when someone knocked. Didn't answer my phone even when Mom called 5 times. Then Dad twice. Then Aunt Carla again. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling my phone vibrate endlessly on the dresser until the screen went silent. The next day, the silence didn't last. Mom's voicemail was frantic. "Avery, please call me back. You don't understand what you've done. Your sister is hysterical. She could lose everything over this. Dad's was harder, sharper. You've embarrassed us. This isn't how a family handles things. We don't drag each other through the legal system. Fix this. Today." I deleted both messages without listening to the end. Mid-afternoon, I made the mistake of answering an unknown number. Is this Avery? Yes. This is your Uncle Dave. You need to drop the charges. Right now. I'm not dropping anything, I said. He exhaled sharply like I was inconveniencing him. Your mom told us everything. She told you Sienna needed the car. She told you she explained it to you. There it was again. The lie spreading like a virus. She didn't explain anything, I said. She took my car. Without permission. He scoffed. She said you were being dramatic. And honestly, I believe her. I hung up. That evening, Jordan stopped by my desk with a hesitant expression. Your family's blowing up your phone? He asked. Yeah. It's like I committed a war crime, I muttered. He slid a sticky note toward me. On it was a security timestamp. Check this when you get home, he said quietly. There's another clip. Later in the day. My brows furrowed. What clip? He lowered his voice. Your dad came back. Around noon. He walked around the empty spot for a while. Then he looked right at the camera. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Why would he come back? I whispered. Jordan shook his head. Maybe he thought you wouldn't notice the car was gone until later. Maybe he was checking if the cameras were on. I don't know, Avery, but something about it felt off. After work, I watched the footage. There he was. My father walking across the garage, hands shoved in his pockets, glancing around like a man searching for something he lost. Then he stopped in my parking spot and stared at the camera. Directly. His jaw tightened. His hand flexed at his side. I didn't know what it meant. But for the first time, I let myself wonder if this wasn't just a case of bad judgment. If maybe deep down, a part of him knew exactly what he was taking from me and did it anyway. The escalation didn't stop there. The next morning, as I walked into work, I found a note tucked under my office door. Handwritten, slanted, angry. You're ruining this family. Fix it before it's too late. No signature. But I recognized the handwriting. My mother's. I folded the note carefully, slid it into my bag, and sat at my desk for a long moment, letting a new truth settle in. They didn't just expect me to forgive them. They expected me to protect them. From consequences. From accountability. From reality. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to. The next week, when the court date arrived, I walked into that building not as the strong one, not as the peacekeeper, not as the daughter who bent until she broke, but as someone finally choosing herself. And everything after that choice would change my family forever. Courtroom 4. B was colder than I expected, cold in the way hospitals are cold, cold in the way places built for truth always seem to be. I could smell disinfectant, old paper, and the faint trace of someone's too strong cologne hanging in the air. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed just enough to make the silence feel heavier. I sat alone on the left side, the victim label clipped to my case file like some kind of cruel joke. I kept my hands folded in my lap knuckles, white heart pounding with a slow, deliberate rhythm that felt like it belonged to someone else. When the clerk called the case State of Colorado versus Sienna Cole, my parents flinched like the words were bullets. They sat on the opposite side, Mom with a crushed tissue in her fist, Dad stiff and glaring like someone had personally offended him by enforcing the law, and Sienna between them, small and pale, her hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her knee bounced beneath the table rapidly and panicked. She wouldn't look at me. Will the defendant please rise? The judge said. Sienna stood. She looked younger than 27, suddenly a teenager again, terrified and waiting for someone to protect her. Except this time, the only person she'd ever relied on wasn't shielding her. I was sitting across the aisle, letting the truth sit between us like a wall that couldn't be moved. The judge's voice was calm. Controlled. Miss Cole, I understand you have chosen to enter a plea today. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, she whispered. Please speak clearly. Yes, Your Honor. She unfolded a sheet of paper, hands trembling, breath uneven. I felt something twist in me. Pity, resentment. Maybe both. But I kept my face still. I have a statement, Sienna said. The judge nodded. Proceed. Her voice wavered as she began. I, Sienna Cole, admit that on the morning of October 14th, I took my sister's vehicle without her permission. I knew the car belonged to her. I took it anyway, because I assumed she, would forgive me. Her lip trembled, like she always has. My mother sucked in a shaky breath. Sienna continued. What I did was wrong. I put myself and others in danger. I am deeply sorry. Her lawyer gave a small approving nod, but the judge asked Miss Cole before I proceeded with sentencing, is there anything you would like to add in your own words? Something not written by counsel. The lawyer stiffened. This wasn't part of the plan. Sienna blinked rapidly, eyes shiny. She glanced toward our parents. Mom gave a single shake of her head, barely a movement, but Sienna saw it. Dad glared hard enough to carve stone. Something in Sienna shifted. Her shoulders rose on a shaky inhale. Then she said, I thought they told her. The room stopped breathing. The judge leaned forward. Explain. Sienna pressed her hands flat against the podium, knuckles white. My mom, she told me Avery knew. She said Avery had agreed. She said Avery would be upset for a minute, but she'd get over it. Her voice cracked. She said, your sister's strong. She'll always be fine. Just don't tell her until after the interview or she'll freak out. A strangled sound escaped my mother's throat. Your Honor. The judge slammed her gavel once. You will not speak unless addressed. Dad's face went red. Sienna, stop. She whispered, barely audible. Stop telling me what to say. She turned back to the judge. I didn't lie to her myself, but I knew it wasn't right. I knew she didn't say yes. I just let it happen. I'm sorry. The judge nodded slowly, taking in every word. Mr. and Mrs. Cole, she said, her voice now edged with something icy. Is what your daughter said accurate? Did you imply consent on the victim's behalf? Mom's voice was a fragile thread. We may have said Avery was fine with it. We thought it would help avoid conflict. This wasn't supposed to go this far. The judge's expression hardened. So you knowingly misrepresented the lawful owner's consent. Dad bristled. This is a private family matter. We didn't steal from strangers. The law, the judge said sharply, does not exempt family members from accountability. In fact, misuse of trust is often more serious. A flush crept up Dad's neck. The judge turned back to Sienna. Thank you for your honesty. Let's proceed. She read the sentencing calmly, firmly. 6 months of probation, a 1-year license suspension, mandatory driving safety courses, and restitution for impound fees and damages. No jail time. But a record. A consequence. A line in the sand. Mom burst into tears. Dad put an arm around her but glared at the judge like she'd personally wronged him. Sienna wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, shoulders trembling. And not once did either of my parents look at me. As court adjourned, the room erupted with movement. Papers shuffled, doors opened, voices rose. My parents rushed to Sienna, cocooning her in sympathy, whispering comforts. Mom cupped her face. Dad called the judge a tyrant under his breath. I watched all of it in silence. Sienna glanced at me finally. Our eyes met for the first time since the morning she'd taken my car. She looked not angry, not wounded, just tired. Humans. She opened her mouth, a flicker of something like regret crossing her face. But before she could speak, Mom grabbed her arm. Not now, she hissed. Don't let her make this worse. Her, me, the problem. The villain in the family script. They walked past me without a nod, their outrage swirling around them like a storm cloud. And then something inside me settled. Not satisfied, not triumph, something steadier. The quiet certainty of a boundary drawn in steel. When I stepped outside, the Denver air was crisp, almost sharp, like it was waking me up. Snow dusted the sidewalks. The sky hung low and pale, the city buzzing faintly in the distance. I walked to my Camry, my car slid into the driver's seat, and rested my hands on the wheel. The leather felt warm from the sun. Familiar. Mine. Not borrowed, not shared, not taken. Mine. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth, not soft, not sweet. Cold, clear, final. The kind of smile you have when you realize you will never again be the version of yourself who accepted chaos disguised as love. I turned the key, the engine humming to life. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through Denver, past the glass towers, catching the late afternoon sun, past the old brick buildings near Lodo, past streets where people walked with grocery bags and headphones, and easy lives that didn't look anything like mine. The hum of the engine steadied me. For the first time in weeks, my breathing didn't feel shallow. The world didn't feel tilted. I ended up at a scenic overlook west of the city, somewhere I'd pulled over once on a whim after a long shift just to watch the lights fade across the mountains. I parked, killed the engine, and let the silence settle. The air was crisp enough to sting my cheeks. Below me, Denver glittered like 100 small promises. I looked at the courthouse papers in the passenger seat. Sienna's signature, the restitution amount, the judge's final remarks. Evidence of a shift no one in my family ever expected. I traced a finger along the edge of the documents. I wasn't gloating, but something in me, not anger, not pettiness, felt newly awake. Something that had been quiet my whole life, too afraid of losing people who never bothered to keep me in the first place. My phone buzzed. A blocked number. I let it ring. Another buzz, this time a voicemail from my father. "We need to talk. This family is falling apart because you refuse to let something small go." Small. $30,000. 6 years of savings, lifetime of being told to disappear. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. The sun dipped lower, brushing the mountains with gold. I leaned back in my seat and let the warmth hit my face. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the flash drive Jordan had given me, the one with all the camera footage, the morning theft, my father returning hours later, staring into the lens like he knew exactly what he'd done. Ruiz hadn't used that second clip in the case. She didn't need to. But I still had it. I turned the flash drive over in my hand, the metal catching the light. A quiet thought slid into place, steady and undeniable. They thought the courtroom was the consequence. They had no idea what accountability actually looked like, what I might do with the truth, what lines I might finally draw, what I might expose if they pushed me again. This wasn't revenge born of fury. It was the kind of revenge that comes from finally understanding your own worth. And the flash drive felt very, very heavy in my hand. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. Stories like mine don't fade, they echo in the choices we finally make for ourselves. Tell me where you're watching from and whether any part of this felt a little too familiar. Your voice matters here, even if it never mattered at home. And if you've ever drawn a line that no one thought you were brave enough to draw, stay close. This story isn't over.